The intricate relationship between Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, and Christine McVie within Fleetwood Mac stands as one of the most complex and entangled examples of how personal lives and creative artistry can intertwine in the annals of popular music history. Their story is not just a chapter about bandmates and lovers, it's a deep dive into the volatile crossroads where passion meets pain, where friendship dissolves into rivalry, and where heartbreak fuels creation. The emotional ruptures between these members didn't just shape the content of the legendary album Rumors, 1977. They also embodied the transformation of private anguish into public art, illustrating how the fragile line between professional collaboration and personal conflict can both hinder and ignite artistic brilliance. The romance between Nicks and Buckingham began back in 1966. Years before their names graced Fleetwood Mac's roster. Their bond was forged on shared creativity but was riddled with contradictions. Stevie was the emotional, intuitive force, a dreamer who felt every note in her soul. Lindsey, by contrast, was precise, controlled, a perfectionist whose obsessive attention to detail often clashed with Stevie's impulsiveness. Their relationship was a dance of extremes, moments of euphoric inspiration shadowed by storms of conflict. By 1976, as the band readied to record Rumors, the relationship collapsed in a spectacularly public fashion. The tension wasn't just a private wound, it became a crucible in which the entire band's dynamics were altered. Adding further complexity was Lindsey's brief affair with Christine McVie, herself freshly divorced from Fleetwood Mac's bassist, John McVie. This twist turned their already complicated personal ties into a tangled, emotional triangle. In this charged atmosphere, the band members resorted to channeling their fractured emotions through music. Stevie's dreams emerged as a haunting blend of apology and accusation, a whispered confession drenched in melancholy. Lindsey fired back with Go Your Own Way, a cutting, bitter anthem of separation and resentment. Christine's Don't Stop, meanwhile, radiated cautious optimism, a plea to look beyond the pain and keep moving forward. The recording sessions became an emotional minefield. The band members, wounded and wary, often recorded separately to avoid direct confrontation. The studio, normally a place of shared creation, transformed into a battlefield of silent stares and clipped interactions. Yet it was precisely this atmosphere, thick with tension and raw honesty, that forged Rumors into a masterpiece. The album's power lies in its brutal honesty. It doesn't mask pain but wears it proudly, transforming fractured relationships into songs that speak to universal experiences of love, loss, and resilience. Yet, the cost of this creative crucible was steep and enduring. The emotional scars lingered far beyond the album's release, coloring decades of subsequent reunions and performances. Despite their musical triumph, the band members remained haunted by the ghosts of past relationships, the wounds that never fully healed. The story of Nicks, Buckingham, and McVie stands as a compelling case study on how artists navigate the treacherous waters between personal vulnerability and professional ambition. It raises difficult questions about the price of greatness and the sacrifices often demanded by true artistic expression. At its core, this is a story about survival, three flawed, brilliant individuals whose personal lives collided and collided again, each leaving marks on the other's soul and the music they created. It is a noir tale woven with shadows of love and betrayal, illuminated by moments of fleeting hope and enduring pain. Rumors remains more than just an album, it is a chronicle of human complexity, told through the language of broken hearts and indomitable spirit. And while the music soars beyond the personal, the lives behind it remind us that even in triumph, the scars of the past never fade. Beneath the glare of the stage lights, behind the sweet melodies and seductive drumbeats of Fleetwood Mac, lies a tangled web of overlapping emotions, wounds never healed, and smoldering cracks that run like fractures through an old wall, never breaking outright, but always threatening collapse. Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, and Christine McVie were not just three links in a legendary band, they were the 3 points of a love triangle where art was born from shattered trust, passion, and betrayal. It was the summer of 1966, in a little corner of San Francisco caught up in the hippie movement's restless pulse, where a blonde girl with a voice like the wind met a young man obsessed with the guitar's sound. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, both incomplete pieces, like lost shards searching for each other in a chaotic world. Their love didn't come like a storm, but rather like mist and smoke, alluring, elusive, and distinctly artistic. But what no one foresaw was that smoke could sting the eyes, confuse the path, and vanish with the rising sun. For nearly a decade, Nicks and Buckingham built a relationship steeped in creativity, recording and performing together as the duo Buckingham-Nicks, a commercial failure but a catalyst that would eventually bring them both into Fleetwood Mac in 1975. The band at the time was desperate to escape internal chaos. Guitarist Bob Welch had just left, and Mick Fleetwood, the helmsman of the ship, was scrambling for a new direction. When he heard Buckingham's demo, he didn't just hear refined guitar skills, he sensed a new voice for the group. Buckingham's only condition? Stevie Nicks had to come along. From that moment on, everything changed. But not in the way anyone expected. Fleetwood Mac stepped into its most prosperous and most turbulent period in history. Behind the spotlight's glow and a string of hit singles lay a maze of intertwined relationships, spun like a spider's web. Christine McVie, the gifted keyboardist and one of the band's chief songwriters, was then separated from her husband, bassist John McVie. Though their split was quiet, the bottled-up emotions couldn't stay hidden within the cramped space of the recording studio. It was in this environment, in 1976, that rumors began to take shape, not just as an album, but as a cryptic diary written in notes and stifled sobs. Nothing remained private when pain itself became the raw material for art. The breakup between Nicks and Buckingham crept into every layer of the harmonies. Cold glances, unspoken arguments in their eyes, and furious guitar solos replaced embraces and smiles. Ironically, music became the only language they still spoke, a dialogue steeped in venom, where every lyric was a veiled retaliation and every melody a sharp knife plunged into shared memories. Stevie Nicks wrote Dreams on a brief afternoon in Sausalito. Armed with just a Fender Rhodes keyboard and an hour to spare, she crafted a ballad both melancholic and delicate. Now here you go again, you say you want your freedom. The words sounded more like a sigh than an accusation, a kind of emotional truce where the woman stopped fighting, simply accepted, and moved on. That was Stevie Nicks, emotional, instinctual, and strangely gentle amid the wreckage. Lindsey Buckingham responded without mercy. Go Your Own Way was a declaration of war. Strong, unyielding, and cutting with a hint of bitterness. Packing up, shacking up is all you want to do, a line Stevie would always see as a personal insult. For Buckingham, this was more than an emotional response, it was his way of holding on to control in a relationship spiraling out of reach. A perfectionist in every sonic detail, he expressed pain not as water dissolving, but as tightly structured, razor-sharp sound. Meanwhile, Christine McVie found herself trapped at the center of a psychological battlefield none of them, least of all her, wanted to enter. Newly divorced and emotionally vulnerable, she appeared as a temporary refuge for Buckingham, a new arm reaching out in the storm. Their brief affair, though fleeting, complicated everything further. McVie, usually mild and discreet, was thrust into the role of an emotional intermediary while nursing her own wounds. Don't Stop, the hit she wrote during this period, might sound like a cheerful encouragement, don't stop thinking about tomorrow, but beneath the surface lay the anguish of someone desperately holding herself back from the abyss. It wasn't a message to others, but a self-affirmation, a hypnotic mantra to survive in a work environment where every step echoed the heartbreak that lingered. The Sausalito studio quickly turned into a cold battlefield. The members communicated through thick glass, via sound engineers, or layered mixes. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew. One small mistake in the harmony could ignite a blazing conflict. Love was absent, only suspicion and defense remained. But it was precisely this cruelty that forged music destined to live forever. Rumors became the 8th best-selling album in music history, winning the Grammy for Album of the Year in 1978 and earning a place among the greatest albums ever made. But what was the cost of that greatness? Sleepless nights, suffocatingly silent recording sessions, avoiding gazes, and dreams dissolving into smoke. The scars didn't fade after Rumors. They were simply masked by layers of success, by temporary reunions, by tours motivated more by contracts than emotions. The shadow of the past never left, and every time they took the stage together, the audience didn't just hear music, they heard the history of brokenness, the unresolved past. In a world where art is often romanticized as salvation from pain, Fleetwood Mac stands as proof of a harsher truth. Art doesn't always save people, but people often use their unhealed wounds to create greatness. And sometimes, that is the tragedy. The emotional file of Nicks, Buckingham, and McVie is an open case. None of them ever found complete closure. Love, creativity, and pain, 3 elements tangled without order, leaving music as the only constant. But when the music fades, what remains is the echo of what was lost. There's an old saying in the world of artists, the stage is where people speak truth through lies, but backstage is where they lie with the language of true feelings. If that's the case, then Fleetwood Mac in the late 70s was a theater without curtains, a raw arena where emotional performances were pushed to the breaking point. Rumors wasn't just an album, it was a dossier of a war, simmering, layered, and riddled with contradictions. Behind the chart-topping hits were stolen glances, whispered conversations in shadowy wings, and hastily poured drinks to numb moments too painful to voice. From the outside, they were gods of their era, sold-out world tours, millions of records moving off shelves, praised by magazines as icons of artistic transcendence. But inside, the band was like a room filled with shattered mirrors, each fragment reflecting a corner of fractured lives. Christine McVie, with her gentle demeanor and discreet lifestyle, was the least targeted by the media's glare. Yet, during the gestation of Rumors, she played a pivotal role in the excruciating love triangle between Nicks and Buckingham. After her cold divorce from John McVie, a chapter rarely spoken of between them, Christine seemed to drift into a void, caught somewhere between freedom and alienation. In that void, Buckingham, burning with the fresh pain of parting from Nicks, sought refuge in her. A brief affair blossomed fleeting, but leaving ripples like stones tossed onto an already disturbed pond. For Nicks, this was far more than jealousy. It was a symbolic betrayal, the man she had loved fiercely now turning to the one bandmate she had trusted as her safe harbor. Christine had been the confidant through sleepless nights, the witness to loneliness behind the spotlight, the steady voice amid pressure to maintain her eternal witch persona. That fracture in trust forced Nicks into a shell, leaving only music as her outlet. Dreams was born from that solitude, during a night spent alone in a recording room draped in red velvet, where Nicks would always light incense and candles, recording in the half-light. The song didn't scream or accuse, it whispered with biting irony, "Now here you go again. You say you want your freedom." The opening line was a bitter smirk. Nicks didn't name names, but everyone knew who the target was. Buckingham was no silent observer. With a controlling nature, he refused to let the story be told from a single perspective. Go your own way was his declaration, and counterattack raw, rough, with guitar cuts slicing like knives. The line packing up. Shacking up is all you want to do enraged Nix so much she demanded its removal from the album, to no avail. For Buckingham, truth didn't need sugarcoating. If she could tell her story, so could he. Caught in the crossfire, Christine chose neutrality through Don't Stop, a song so optimistic it almost seemed naive, as if she was trying to ignore the chaos around her. But those in the studio knew better. Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow wasn't just advice to others, it was a self-reassurance. Christine was rarely the angry type. But that didn't mean she wasn't hurting. In her personal journals, she wrote, "I feel like a child trying to keep 3 adults from fighting in a cramped kitchen." Tensions escalated from personal to procedural. Recording sessions took place in separate rooms, demos passed between engineers like letters between estranged lovers. When forced together, politeness was a mask, smiles given on cue, nods at the right moment, but eyes never locking for more than 3 seconds. Mick Fleetwood, the drummer and the only one not involved in the tangled romances, described the period as living inside a ticking time bomb. He was the silent witness, trying to keep the band afloat, while himself caught in the emotional storm. During this chaos, he embarked on a brief affair with Nix, another chapter in Fleetwood Mac's never-ending drama. This event, yet again, layered another knot of complexity onto the already tangled emotional map. Buckingham, despite no longer being Nix's lover, erupted in anger upon discovering it, as if his territory had been invaded. Ironically, he was the very one who had caused Nix pain by turning to Christine. It was as if they were trapped in a chess match of feelings. Each move calculated, every advance a response to the previous blow. No one in this story was purely a victim. No one was entirely innocent. They were at once perpetrators, victims, and accomplices in an emotional ecosystem out of control. Amidst this maelstrom, the paradox was that the music kept coming deeper, stronger, and more profound. Rumors became a monument not only to melody but to the stark truths behind each lyric. It wasn't just storytelling. It was physical evidence of a moment where art and agony were 2 sides of the same coin. People didn't listen to rumors merely to enjoy it. They felt the vibration between 2 opposing lines, love and hate, forgiveness and revenge. When the album dropped in 1977, the public embraced it like a legend. They didn't know the full story, but they sensed the raw authenticity in every track. The irony? The more shattered they were inside, the more magnificent Fleetwood Mac appeared to the outside world. After long tours, the players slowed down, not because forgiveness had come, but because none had the strength left to fight. Nix once penned in a letter to herself, "If I keep singing about the things that hurt me, one day I'll forget what happiness feels like." But even when the noise settled, the scars remained. Each reunion, 1987, 1997, 2014, came burdened with emotional baggage never fully unpacked. They could shake hands on stage, smile for the crowd, but inside, each was still living with ghosts of a time that refused to die. Fleetwood Mac never broke up, but they never truly healed. And perhaps that was what made them immortal. They didn't stand for harmony, but endurance. Not because they had overcome it all, but because they still stood there fractured, conflicted, as proof that sometimes art doesn't need peace to survive. It only needs a truth fierce enough to burn. Los Angeles, late 1977. Rumors had already sold millions of copies. The band was riding high, a kite catching the strongest wind. Money, fame, sold-out tours, and hotel nights stretched long with half-empty glasses of champagne. But backstage? It was no longer a celebration, it was a battlefield. Every smile was forged from steel, and every glance was a reminder that we all know what's going on and we're just playing along. Stevie Nicks, now the band's soul, a golden-haired sorceress cloaked in sheer chiffon, often arrived at the studio hours late, eyes distant, lyrics hastily scribbled on cocktail napkins. But her gaze frequently met Lindsay, the man she once loved, for whom she had written dozens of songs, now silently turning away, tuning his guitar with cold precision. Christine McVie had become the band's uneasy mediator. She sang with a sweetness that hid a brewing storm inside. After her breakup with John, Christine sought Lindsay as a brief refuge, a dangerous, fleeting affair. Not just a romance, but an intrusion into a sacred emotional territory Stevie fiercely guarded. The real problem wasn't about who slept with whom. It was that all this played out inside Fleetwood Mac, where every member was not just a colleague but also a keeper of one another's memories, wounds, and secrets. The band was a tangled web of unspoken treaties and forbidden zones everyone tacitly agreed to avoid, but someone always crossed the line. The new frontline, the Tusk album. After Rumors, the band moved into preparation for their next album, Tusk. It was not just a musical challenge but a final test of their fragile unity. Lindsay, desperate to prove his creative genius, took control of everything, from microphone placement to track order. He acted like a cold, exacting film director obsessed with every detail. Stevie couldn't tolerate it. She wanted room to fly, to sing like summoning spirits from the past, free like the Arizona wind. Each time Lindsay frowned and altered her lyrics, it felt like reopening an old wound. "You're trying to remake me into your image," she once said during a mixing session, just the two of them, a piano, a glass of wine, and two tangled pasts. Christine remained silent. She observed from behind her keyboard as if writing a diary in melody. She knew she was caught between two forces, one, her closest friend, the other, her former lover. And she knew that anything she said could ignite flames. One morning during soundcheck, Christine arrived early and found Stevie sitting alone. On the table lay a fresh set of lyrics, marked with corrections and crossed-out words. Stevie didn't look up. "Christine, you know Lindsay hasn't let go of me, right?" Christine hesitated, then whispered, "I know you haven't let go of him either." The silence stretched on, a note that refused to end. Rumors, anonymous letters, and the nightmare of success. During Tusk's recording sessions, the press began to publish stories implying that Fleetwood Mac was falling apart. Some called them a hive about to collapse. Others printed relationship charts that looked like labyrinths. Rumors spread that Christine and Lindsay were secretly seeing each other. Others claimed Stevie was dating a powerful music manager just to make Lindsay jealous. The more famous they became, the less control they had over their own story. One night, John McVie found an unsigned letter slipped under his hotel room door detailing meetings between Christine and Lindsay down to times and places. He said nothing but drowned himself in whiskey that night before stepping on stage, beating his drums like he wanted to shatter the past. Christine knew about the letter but refused to face it. Stevie exploded, convinced Lindsay was behind it. "You want to tear everything apart because you can't control my heart," she shouted during a band meeting. Lindsay didn't answer, only smiled. Colder than a January frost in Colorado. The fateful show in St. Louis. One of the tensest moments came in spring 1979. Fleetwood Mac was touring Tusk. That night, before 15,000 fans in St. Louis, the stage lights spotlighted Stevie as she sang Sarah, a song hinting at both Lindsay and Christine, born from her rawest emotions. Lindsay stood a few feet away, guitar trembling in his hands. Christine played quietly, eyes glued to the keys, as if afraid to look up lest she witness the world crumble. As Stevie sang, "Sarah, you're the poet in my heart / never change, never stop." Lindsay suddenly stepped into the spotlight for a longer than usual guitar solo. It wasn't a mistake, it was a statement. Like he was claiming back the song. Stevie left the stage immediately afterward, not waiting for the final note. Backstage that night was hell. No one spoke. Only footsteps pounding on the floor, doors slamming. And a headline the next morning, Fleetwood Mac at their peak and maybe their internal bottom. An open-ended ending to a vicious triangle. Tusk wasn't the roaring success rumors had been, though it earned artistic praise. But after that album, the band wasn't the same. They kept working, performing, writing deeply emotional songs, but everything had changed. The silent deals. Forbidden zones, and glances no longer burned with fire but smoldered with ash. Stevie and Christine grew closer, like the last allies left in a war with no end. They often sat together after shows, sharing what they couldn't say to Lindsay or John. Christine whispered once, "We live in a sandcastle. Beautiful, but every wave means collapse." Stevie replied, "Yeah. But I keep rebuilding it. Because without it, there's nothing left." Fleetwood Mac didn't break up right away. They had many years left to sing, to hurt, to heal, and to hurt again. But Tusk marked a turning point where the past wasn't nostalgia but a ghost. Where songs became not just art but evidence of a life they barely controlled anymore. Sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't an ending, it's the absence of one. Fleetwood Mac has never truly broken up, just as they've never been truly whole. They exist suspended between two states, part legend, part open wound. And the cruelest truth of all, they know this, yet they keep moving forward. They keep singing, keep playing. Keep drowning in that dark magic called memory. They weren't just writing songs. They were staging a crime scene without a solution where every witness was also a suspect. And each track was a piece of evidence. The last testimony of the survivors. After Christine's death, Stevie seemed to change her tune. She appeared more often in interviews, scribbled handwritten letters, and shared memories as if trying to chase down clues left behind. In a rare 2023 conversation, she said, "Lindsay and I were destined for each other in the worst and the most beautiful ways. We knew how to destroy each other, and we knew how to make each other immortal." Lindsay, when asked about Stevie on a late-night show, just smiled quietly. "There are people you never marry, but never really leave either. Some call it musical love, others say it's artist's fate. But if you're honest, it's more like a haunting, the ghost that refuses to vanish, lingering in every riff, every chorus, every return to the stage. Songs that keep telling the same old story. Every song in Rumors, Tusk, Mirage, and Tango in the Night is more than art, they're diaries. Surveillance cameras recording the past. X-rays revealing emotional wounds. Dreams is Stevie watching Lindsay slip through her fingers. Go Your Own Way is Lindsay pushing Stevie away with a cruel smile. You Make Loving Fun is Christine whispering to her new lover, while her ex-husband plays bass behind her. Silver Springs is Stevie returning from the hell of memory, reclaiming her soul. Strangely, the audience sings these songs happily, as if they don't realize they're collectively chanting a legal indictment, a confession, a requiem for souls who loved at the wrong time. Fleetwood Mac doesn't stand for love, nor for destruction. They are living proof of the gray area, the shadow zone of human emotion. No heroes here. No villains. Just people too gifted, too broken, and too deeply entwined to love properly. Stevie loved Lindsay, but she envied his talent. Lindsay loved Stevie, but feared being consumed by her. Christine loved John, then someone else, then herself again. Mick stood in the middle, like a detective who would never solve his band's case. They weren't the Beatles, where friendship shattered under ambition. nor the Rolling Stones, where every conflict was smoothed by stage bravado. Fleetwood Mac was a 50-year noir film, every scene real, every player aware they were trapped in a tragedy of their own making. The final word on an immortal triangle. We talk about Stevie as a feminist icon, Lindsay as a cold genius, Christine as a gentle heart amid the storm. But inside that triangle, no one was innocent. No one a victim. They were people who chose to love through music, and used music to try each other. If you had to picture them, Fleetwood Mac is like a shattered mirror. Each shard reflecting a memory. Each cut a song. And when you piece it together, you don't see a band, you see yourself, with all the loves gone wrong, the broken pieces, the wounds refusing to heal. The final note in the detective file. The case file on Fleetwood Mac runs thousands of pages thick. And though many chapters have closed, no one dares write the end. Because the songs still echo. The old players still breathe. And hearts that collided back in '75 are still unwilling to rest. In the art world, few bands have inspired such love and fear at the same time. Maybe that's why Fleetwood Mac will never truly disappear. They don't need a stage. They don't need a new album. Just a radio turned on and Stevie's whisper in your ear. I know I could have loved you, but you would not let me. That's all it takes. The case goes on. In every listener's heart. On rainy nights. In the dim light of a lonely bar where someone sits nursing memories, wondering quietly. Are the ones we love the most also the ones who kill us the softest?